Beyond the amber waves of grain, over $1 million worth of equipment sits idle. These are the machines of the Meisner family, one of 700 crews known as custom harvesters who haul in nearly half of the United States wheat crop. Each year, they race against time to gather the delicate grain.
Once the crop is ready, you need to be right on top of it, all within a week's time. And we actually follow the harvest of the wheat as it matures north.
The responsibility of feeding the world weighs heavily on their shoulders. Any holdup at harvest could be catastrophic. At their stop in Elk City, Oklahoma, the Meisner crew has been delayed by a recent rainstorm. And this custom harvester is desperate to get rolling again.
When these machines of mine are not running, it's costing me $1,500 an hour. We've been sitting for a couple of days here, but we've had a good strong wind here, so hopefully this wheat is going to run now. But we'll just get out here and see what we got for a sample and check things out.
Before harvest can begin, the moisture level of the wheat must be under 13.5%. Any higher, and the wheat could spoil. The head or spike of the wheat contains the kernels, or grain, which are the only part of the plant used for human food.
We're going to grab a few heads here, and the object is we're going to put them in my palm here, and we're going to thrash those kernels out of that head and then bite on them. And you hear them crack, pop, it's going to be ready to go. We got a couple of soft ones, but it really tastes pretty darn good. We're going to go. We're going to try it. My crew's anxious to start cutting wheat. So we're going to get going here. Okay, I'm going to get them organized. Crank them up. We're going to cut wheat. Copying the combines. Go ahead and raise all your heads up. Pull in and just make a nice gradual sweep.
The vast majority of the crop they harvest is hard red winter wheat, which ultimately becomes the staff of life, bread. Harvest starts in Texas every May and wraps up in Canada in September. By that time, the Meisner team alone will harvest more than 1 million bushels, enough wheat to feed nearly 500,000 people for a year. That's if the weather doesn't best them.
We've been in hail. We have been in the field with a tornado within a quarter of a mile of us. We do a lot of praying to the good Lord.
And their machines don't break down.
It's a family operation. When my wife and I started, we had 2 combines. She drove one, I drove one. We have 6 children, 4 daughters and 2 sons. Every one of the kids have grown up on the floor of a combine.
Now their operation has grown to 5 combines. It's equipment and manpower that many wheat farmers can't afford.
They can actually get our wheat out in 3 days, whereas it would take us almost 2 weeks with one machine. Being a wheat farmer probably is being one of the biggest gamblers there is. You've got a crop worth hundreds of thousands in the field that can be wiped out in the matter of 30 minutes.
These gamblers depend on the custom harvester to be their ace in the hole. Though custom harvesting with combines has been around for more than 100 years, the industry really took hold in the 1940s. But some crews became hasty and dishonest. Farmers tagged them harvest gypsies. This perception stuck until the 1960s, when it became a reputable profession. Today's custom cutters are the dependable warriors of the wheat harvest. They can clean out 100 acres per combine per day. Emma Meisner has been behind the wheel of a combine since she was 10 years old.
At first, when you get into it, you know, haven't driven before, it's really nerve-wracking. There's a lot of things to watch at one time, but it's just fun. It's just like mowing the lawn with a 30-foot head. You know, what girl wouldn't like to drive a huge combine?
As each 30-foot wide, 30,000-pound combine rolls through a field, a spinning reel pulls the wheat into a razor-sharp sickle bar that cuts the stalks.
This is very, very sharp. It will cut anything off that comes in front of it. So this is very, very hardened material. It's a special alloy steel that is heat treated. These knives are not sharpened. They stay sharp for the duration of the life.
Once cut, an auger moves the stalks through the feeder house and into the heart of the machine, where the grain is separated from the stem. The huge force of a cylinder spinning against a concave at up to 960 RPM knocks the grain off the stem. This process is called threshing. The separated grain then falls through the grates of the concave into a cleaning system before it's moved into the holding tank. Since each tank can only hold about 300 bushels of wheat, the combine must unload on the move nearly every 30 minutes.
I go from combine to combine and take their wheat and put it in the grain cart and then bring it to the truck so the truck can bring the wheat to market.
The semis make multiple trips back and forth to the grain elevator each day. A holdup with the trucks could mean serious setbacks in the field.
Sometimes there will be no line of trucks here. You can just pull up on the scale. Sometimes it'll be like this. I could say we could be here at least a good hour. Luckily, we've got a couple other trucks back at the field.
This is no 9-to-5 job.
We can run 24/7 if we needed to. And I have run all night long, knowing that if there would be a rainstorm coming on in the morning, we would cut right till we would get rained on. We stay generally on the farmer's place. We have 3 travel trailers. We have a main house where all the meals are served out of. In line. My wife is a fantastic cook. She can cook anything and everything on a grill. You name it, she can do it all. And then we have a crew trailer, which all the guys are in.
This is our home away from home. It's kind of small. We got anywhere from 3 to 7 guys living in here, kind of depending on the harvest year. Back here we have 3 bunks. They kind of stack them in here, kind of tight. The top 2 each have a window. The bottom one does not. We like to refer to that as the burrow. And then this is where the other 3 guys sleep. This bed down here is actually where I sleep. Not a small guy, so the easiest way to get in the bed is kind of lay on the floor and you just kind of roll in, and then when you get up in the morning, you just kind of roll out. It's pretty comfortable. I mean, by the time you get done working for 12, 14-hour days, whatever it is, you're so beat that you just want to go to sleep.
The work is very, very hard, but it's so gratifying because people entrust you with such large responsibility. The job we've just completed, we did well over 3,000 acres in just over a week's time. We almost held off $1 million worth of wheat.
But there's no time to rest. The Meisners must roll on to the next wheat farm before Mother Nature strikes again. They still have 400 fields in 3 more states to harvest before their work ends. The combine caravan has become commonplace in the Great Plains. But just 200 years ago, farmers could only rely on manpower to harvest their crop. Cutting wheat was done solely by hand, with a long, sharp cutting blade called a scythe.
Back in those days, the fields were nothing compared with the size of these fields. You'd have a heart attack before you got a field like this cut. It was a little slow, but it was good, honest, hard work.
But muscle can't compete with machinery. While a farmer and his scythe can cut maybe 2 acres of wheat per day, today's modern combines can cut the same 2 acres in 12 minutes or less. And in just 9 seconds, a combine harvests enough wheat to make 70 loaves of bread. And the world demands plenty of bread. Next to corn, wheat is the 2nd most cultivated cereal grain in the world.
Wheat is grown virtually everywhere, and in any given month of the year, wheat is being harvested somewhere in the world.
More than 60 million acres of wheat are harvested each year in the United States. Out of the 42 wheat-growing states, Kansas typically ranks number 1. In fact, nearly 1/5 of all U.S. wheat is Kansas-grown. North Dakota is a close second.
Kansas grows about 10 million acres per year of wheat, which is a lot of wheat. But the world as a whole grows about 500 million acres per year of wheat. The number 1 producer in the world, surprisingly, is actually China.
China produces more than 90 million tons of wheat each year. and India generates 70 million tons. The United States' 60 million tons ranks third, followed by Russia, France, and Canada. Even so, the United States is the largest wheat exporter. Nearly 50% of the crop is shipped overseas each year.
Wheat provides approximately 20% of the food needs of the world. 1 acre will produce enough wheat to feed 9,000 people for one day.
The Port of Portland in Oregon exports the largest amount of United States wheat. 4 million tons pass through Columbia Grain's Terminal 5 export elevator each year.
The grain that we're going to get here is going to go all over the world. Our primary customers are the Far Eastern flour millers, Japan being a very big customer.
The facility unloads about 75% of the wheat by rail car.
Each one of these cars really takes only about 5 minutes to unload. The wheat is going to fall into the rail receiving pit here, and then it's going to access some conveying systems to get to bucket elevator legs, where we'll take it to the top of the elevator and then distribute it for storage into one of the storage silos.
With a storage capacity of 100,000 tons, the inventory may be emptied and refilled up to 5 times each month. 2 conveyor belts carry the grain at 900 tons per hour from the silos out to the ship for transport.
We're loading hard red winter wheat in this hatch. It's going to hold about 10,000 tons, which is equivalent to the size of one of those 110-car shuttle trains. We started loading this vessel about 2 in the morning today, and it'll take us a couple days to finish it.
But this worldwide staple wasn't always so widely distributed. Wheat originated as a wild grass food more than 16,000 years ago in Southwest Asia, in the area known as the Fertile Crescent, modern-day Syria and Iraq. Nomads gathered the so-called wild einkorn wheat, separated the kernels, and ate them raw. Around 7000 BC, they discovered that planting the grain yielded yet more seeds. And it was these seeds of wheat that became the seeds of civilization.
People no longer were forced to migrate around looking for wild stands of wheat. It really was the genesis of our civilization, that people were able to become full-time farmers.
By 5000 BC, wheat farming had spread throughout Asia and into Europe and North Africa. Soon, farmers began to cook and grind the grains.
When people first started grinding whole grains into flour, this was as advanced as it got.
By adding water to the coarse ground flour, farmers could create porridge. And many attribute the origin of bread making to a serendipitous event when someone left their wheat porridge out in the hot sun. It's a primitive method that remains tried and true.
So we put that flatbread in the oven about 20 minutes ago. Let's see what we have. Well, there it is. Nicely browned on the sides, pretty light. Smells wheaty. Let's see what happens when we break it open. Very dark, a little moist. Probably could have been thinner, but looks good enough to eat. A little crunchy, tastes right. I can see why people did this for thousands of years.
By chance, wild airborne yeast found its way into an ancient wheat mixture, creating leavened bread. And the rest is delicious history. Today, more than 70% of harvested wheat is used to make bread. Whether baking baguettes, ciabatta, or sourdough, the staff of life is fashioned from wheat. So is pasta. But if Marco Polo didn't bring it to Italy, who did? Beyond
Ooh, hot.
Among the grains found in food products, wheat takes the cake and makes the cake. It's in more than 3,000 foods. But before these items make it to the supermarket shelf, wheat undergoes a high-tech journey from field to flour. The ConAg Mills plant in Decatur, Alabama, grinds more than 1.6 million pounds of flour every day.
About 50% of our wheat comes in via barge, and this particular barge has 50,000 bushels of grain on it, which, to put in perspective, would be roughly 3.6 million loaves of bread. We have 2 power shovels that are pulling the wheat towards the center of the barge, where we have a elevator leg that pulls the wheat up to the conveyor that pulls it back to our flat storage. We can unload 6,200 bushels an hour using those shovels.
Each bushel of wheat contains 1 million kernels. Each kernel is made up of 3 parts. The outer shell, called bran, full of fiber. The embryo, called germ, high in protein. And the nutritive tissue, called endosperm, high in starch. Whole grain flour is made from the entire kernel, while white flour is made from the endosperm only.
Out of 100 pounds of wheat, we'll make about 75 pounds of refined white flour, about 23 pounds of mill feed, which contains the bran, and about 2 pounds of wheat germ.
The process begins with a rigorous cleaning routine to remove any debris from the grain. From there, the kernels enter one of 28 roller mills.
Each roller mill has a slightly different purpose. The stock comes in the top, comes down through the machine's ground, and discharges the bottom. This is the first break roller mill. Here, whole wheat comes into the machine, and it's ground for the first time. The rollers shear the wheat, break it open, prepare it for sifting.
A complex array of pressurized tubes carries the grain from floor to floor.
We're here on the 5th floor of the mill. The purpose of the sifter is to separate the ground mill stalks by particle size. This is done with a nest of sieves inside each sifter section. The sifter swings in about a 3.5-inch circle at about 240 RPM.
As the sifter rotates, the sieves separate the ground grain by size. The larger particles remain at the top, while the smaller ones fall to the bottom.
The coarse brandy particles will go to break rolls, where they'll be ground with roller mills that have teeth, and the endosperm containing white, fine particles will go to reduction rolls, which are smooth, where we'll grind hard into flour.
The kernels pass through these rollers and sifters up to 15 times in just 20 minutes before heading off to packaging as white flour. Though this mechanized process is hundreds of years old, ConAgra has managed to put a new spin on it.
We came up with a special milling process which reduces the bran and the germ particles to the same particle size as the endosperm.
The so-called ultra-grain flour maintains the nutritional value of whole wheat.
This is a traditional whole wheat bread. You can see the very visible bran specks in that. When you look at this 100% ultra-grain product, you can see that it's very much like a white bread product. It has a very soft texture, and when you eat it, it has the very same mouthfeel as some of the white breads that you find in the marketplace today.
Whether it's ultra-grain, whole wheat, or white, choosing the right flour for your baked goods is essential. That's because flour can be ground from 2 types of wheat, hard or soft. In fact, the secret to wheat's superior bread-making ability is gluten, a protein that is formed when water is added to wheat flour and mixed into a dough. The gluten gives bread its volume and structure. It's the key component in the grain that makes dough stretchy and holds baked goods together. Hard wheat contains lots of gluten. These wheats are used to produce bread and rolls. Soft wheat contains little gluten, so the products don't stretch as much, becoming flaky and tender. These wheats are used in crackers, cakes, and pastries. But it takes a special kind of wheat to make the quintessential Italian dish. Durum is an especially hard wheat variety used to create pasta. Americans consume more than 6 billion pounds of pasta each year. New World Pasta is the leading dry pasta manufacturer in the United States. At their plant in Winchester, Virginia, they make oodles and oodles of noodles, 24/7.
We make over 600,000 pounds of product in a day, or up to 200 million pounds in a year. We make several different brands of pasta here, but our most popular are our Ronzoni brands. Directly behind me is our lasagna production. We have 7 production lines where we can make up to 52 different shapes. The process starts with taking semolina flour, adding water, mixing it. The mixing process will take anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes.
Semolina is the coarsely ground endosperm of durum wheat.
It has 2 key essential characteristics, which are color and tenacity. The color comes from the naturally occurring pigments in the wheat, and that translates into the golden color that we normally see in pasta. The tenacity comes from the wheat gluten, which is the protein in the wheat, and that provides the strength of the product.
Under Italian law, pasta can only be made from 100% durum wheat semolina flour and water. Even though there's not a similar law in the United States, New World Pasta still adheres to Italy's strict pasta principle.
After mixing, we extrude the product. During the extrusion process, we are forcing that dough through a die, and that die gives the product a particular shape, similar to what we did as a kid using Play-Doh.
But these industrial Play-Doh machines aren't kid-friendly. Razor-sharp blades rotating beneath the metal dies slice and dice the pasta to size. Once cut, the pasta makes its way to massive dryers that circulate hot, moist air around up to 30,000 pounds of product at a time.
Temperatures will reach up to 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Our short goods products take about 3 hours to dry, where long goods products take up to 5 hours to dry.
Packaging is a modern labyrinth of conveyors, buckets, and chutes, overflowing with spaghetti, penne, and rotini. Wheat's long journey to the dinner table as pasta can be traced as far back as 2000 BC. But pasta's origins are shrouded in mystery and myth. Contrary to popular belief, Marco Polo did not bring pasta to Italy. Most historians believe it was introduced to Italy during the Arab conquests of Sicily in the 8th century. Today, there are more than 600 pasta shapes worldwide. While Americans eat an average of 20 pounds of pasta annually, that's only a third of what their Italian counterparts consume. Cooking pasta is as simple as boiling water, but it takes a keen eye to get it just right.
I like it a little al dente. That means to the tooth. You can usually tell when it's al dente by looking at the ends of the pasta, and you'll see a tiny little white core that's not cooked as well as the surrounding area of the pasta. And it gives it that unique little bite and cleanliness when you're eating it. Perfetto. Molto bene, as they would say in Italy. It's perfect.
While wheat lovers worldwide are piling on the pasta, others are turning to wheat beer to wash it down. But why is it hazy instead of clear like other beers? Beer. 35 billion gallons of the frothy brew are sold worldwide each year. Americans chug down more than 15 million gallons of the stuff each day. Barley is the grain used to make most beers. But at the Widmer Brothers Brewery in Portland, Oregon, wheat has taken over. Since 1986, the brewery has been home to America's original Hefeweizen, or unfiltered wheat beer. It's a brew that first became popular in 15th century Bavaria and currently makes up almost a quarter of beer sales in Germany. Wheat beer's unique style is also catching on in America.
Yeah, that tastes pretty good. Wheat contributes sort of a nice aromatic fresh bread profile, which we find very appealing. It also contributes mouthfeel. It gives the beer more substance on your tongue and on your palate.
Each week, Brewing Brothers Kurt and Rob Widmer turn 75,000 pounds of wheat into more than 125,000 gallons of beer.
Last year we brewed about 350,000 barrels out of this facility. This is kind of the hot end of our brew house, and we can brew 6 or 7 times a day in a 24-hour period.
The bottom line of brewing beer is to convert the grain sugars into alcohol and carbon dioxide.
The process starts with this tank called a mash mixer. That's where you take malted wheat and soak it in warm water.
Malted wheat is grain that has been soaked in water to the point of germination. This causes the grain to produce enzymes that convert its starch into sugar. Even though this brew is Hefeweizen, Widmer uses malted barley for half the mixture.
The enzymatic power of the grain to convert starch to sugar is less in wheat than barley, so you really do need the barley there.
The mash mixture spins for an hour at 126 degrees Fahrenheit.
And then we ramp that up, ending at about 160 degrees, and then we call mash off, which is at 170, and that stops the enzymatic conversion of starch to sugar.
The mash is then pumped into a so-called lauter tun, in which the solution of water and sugars, called wort, is drained from the mash through a sieve-like bottom. A mechanical rotating rake ensures the mash remains fluid throughout the process.
It's about 170 degrees, and it takes about 2 hours to complete the lautering. This is a tricky part of the process when you're brewing wheat beer, because wheat has a higher protein content, and it tends to, to use a technical term, gum up the works. And if you're not kind of on top of it all the time, you can have a stuck mash where the liquid won't flow through. This tank does a great job of making sure that we're able to rinse all the flavor and color and sugar out of the grain.
The remaining wheat and barley head to a local farm to become cattle feed, while the liquid continues onto the kettle for boiling.
So we're done with the grain. We've just got the sweet grain tea called wort. And it's here that hops are introduced. These are baled hops, and what we do is get them pulverized and pelletized.
Hops are flowering plants that give beer its bitterness, aroma, and flavor. Wheat beers tend to have a low amount of hops and a high concentration of carbon dioxide. That means a light flavor with lots of bubbles, making it a popular summertime brew. But where does that golden haze come from?
There are proteins that we extract from the wheat malt that go all the way through to the glass that we think is an essential part of how the beer should look.
Since Hefeweizen is unfiltered, the proteins from the wheat remain suspended in the end product. These long molecular chains are difficult to break apart, creating both a cloudy appearance and the distinctive thick foamy head of the beer. As a result, a bottle of Hefeweizen offers the same amount of protein and carbohydrates as a slice of bread. Back in the brew house, the wort boils for 75 minutes.
But it's still not beer yet. There's no alcohol present. But we've set up the absolute perfect conditions for fermentation, and that's started by adding our yeast.
Yeast is the magical ingredient that converts the sugars into alcohol and carbon dioxide.
Kurt was introduced to the yeast that we use at a small brew pub in Düsseldorf, Germany.
But in 16th century Germany, wheat's esteemed status was grounds for the grain to be banned from beer.
The German purity law, the Reinheitsgebot, dictated that beer could only contain malt, hops, water, and they didn't know about yeast at that time, but it had to be those ingredients, and that was specifically malted barley at that point. And they prescribed that law partially to restrict people from using wheat in beer so that there was more wheat available for bread.
It wasn't until the 20th century that brewing wheat beer was once again permitted in Germany. The Widmer Brothers Brewery houses 6 50-foot-tall fermentation tanks, each with a 1,500-barrel capacity.
So from here, the beer ferments, and it can be as long as a month, depending on the beer type that we're making. Widmer Hefeweizen, the fermentation is a fairly rapid style, and it's ready in about a week. And once it's finished, it's ready for either packaging into bottles or racking, which is beer in the kegging room.
Here's where tradition meets technology.
2 robots do all the heavy lifting that guys used to have to do. But one of the things that the robots do with our beer that's unique, because it's this unfiltered wheat beer, is that we flip our kegs, because we found that when the bar owner flips them right side up again, that helps mix things up a little bit and keeps the beer nice and turbid.
Another way to bring out wheat beer's turbidity is with an authentic German pour.
It's very important when a beer is poured that there be a nice creamy head for the duration of the beer as a person is drinking it. And that takes time. And so what I'm going to show you is how you would typically get it if you were in a small pub in Germany. Bartender would pour this. Walk away, do whatever he has to do. Head dies down a little bit, they come back. And again, I'm pouring right down the center, and I'm not making any effort to minimize the foam up. I want it to actually rise up, and when I'm done, it should be a very thick head that you could balance a quarter on that stays there for the whole duration of the time that you're drinking that beer. God, that looks great, huh? Who could resist that?
Whether guzzling or gobbling the grain, Americans consume an average of 134 pounds of wheat each year. As the worldwide population grows, our reliance on wheat only increases. But some experts fear the fragile crop could vanish in a matter of days. These scientists have turned to corn to prevent that from happening. In the last 100 years, the Earth's population has quadrupled to more than 6.5 billion people. Billions are hungry every day, and hundreds of millions are in danger of starvation. Wheat has provided help in times of famine, epidemic disease, and war. But the future of this saving grain is at stake. Extreme weather, insects, and fungus threaten the survival of wheat fields worldwide. And a substantial loss of the wheat crop would be devastating to the global food supply.
Historically, the world has operated usually in excess of 100 days of stored wheat, so that if we just stopped having wheat, we'd have at least 100 days to feed the world. And over the last, say 10 years, that capacity has been diminishing down to something like 36 or 37 days. It is possible that we could have a disease that could devastate a crop in a matter of 10 or 15 days.
In fact, the staff of life may be in danger. In March of 2008, a virulent strain of wheat stem rust called UG99 that originated in Africa in 1999 spread into Iran, destroying vital wheat fields.
And it's moved through Iran and is now threatening parts of the wheat crop in Pakistan, and eventually is going to threaten the wheat crops in India and even in China. And so it's really critical that breeders find new sources of resistance.
At the Wheat Genetic and Genomic Resource Center at Kansas State University, scientists hope the key to resistance lies in one of wheat's ancient ancestors. In their gene bank devoted solely to wheat, more than 2,500 lines of the plant are maintained for such research purposes.
We do a lot of screening for leaf rust resistance, and we've gone through 500 lines, and some are very resistant to the disease, and others are very susceptible to the disease. So unless you have a lot of lines to screen, you might not have the resistance that you need to transfer to wheat.
And through the modern science of plant breeding, experts hope wheat will weather the storm. AgriPro has the largest wheat breeding program in North America. At their facility in Junction City, Kansas, it all starts with making crosses in the greenhouse. Wheat is a self-pollinating plant. Within each wheat floret are an embryo sac, a stigma, and anthers that contain pollen. When the floret matures, the anthers open and release the pollen. It sticks to the stigma and germinates down into the embryo sac to pollinate the plant. The fertilized embryo ultimately becomes a new wheat kernel.
So what I have to do here to make a cross of wheat is to take the anthers out, so I just have the embryo left.
After meticulously removing each minuscule anther, researchers can then crossbreed the plant with other wheats that have superior qualities, such as disease resistance, high yields, and shorter growing seasons.
Our goal is to produce around 1,000 to 1,500 crosses a year. Out of those 1,000 to 1,500, if we can have 1 to 2 varieties that make it to market, that will be functional to the farmer, we are very happy.
And that journey to market takes 10 to 12 years of testing. Each year, AgriPro technicians plant the experimental varieties in one of their 5 feet by 10 feet test plots. At harvest, only the best are kept to be replanted the following season.
We have close to 700 different plots of wheat. We will come into these plots and we will select 100 to 150 heads for good disease resistance and plant type. The purpose is to develop a variety that has a really good purity.
Today, AgriPro offers 40 wheat varieties for farmers. Although each cost a whopping $1.2 million to develop, AgriPro sells about 9 million 50-pound bags of wheat in the United States and Canada each year. But perhaps the most notable achievements in wheat genetics dates back to the 1960s, when American plant breeder Norman Borlaug developed and introduced new wheat varieties to Mexico, India, and Pakistan. The short, high-yield wheats saved millions from starvation. It was so successful that it came to be called the Green Revolution. Now, once again, wheat is in for a big change with the help of an unlikely source, corn. AgriPro calls it speed breeding because the process takes half as long as traditional methods.
Basically, we're taking a wheat plant and crossing it with a corn plant. And when we do that, you get a viable embryo. That developing embryo recognizes the corn chromosomes as being different. And so the cells of a wheat plant have a number of enzymes that are there to attack and destroy the corn chromosomes. And so what you end up with is a haploid wheat seedling.
Haploid means the wheat embryo only has one set of chromosomes. So technicians double them through a chemical reaction, creating a pure wheat embryo.
If they were left unattended, they would normally abort and die. So we have to go in and very carefully tease out that embryo and put it on an artificial media. That has all of the organics that allows that young embryo to grow into a plant that produces seeds.
Every kernel of the resulting plant will be genetically identical. With this and other methods, scientists are betting on a bright future for this vital crop.
Breeders are going to be able to find wheat that produces much, much higher yields, that is basically impervious to all types of environmental or biological assaults.
While many researchers strive for super wheat, one company hopes the golden grain could be the answer to saving millions of trees. Can wheat rock? A company in Grand Island, Nebraska thinks so.
We saw a great opportunity to reach out to the world through music, teaching the world about biodegradables. We can actually make multiple products, including drumsticks and guitar picks, from different materials such as wheat.
Wheatware makes products from the entire wheat plant. Manufacturing starts with bioresin, a plastic-like material derived from the plant's sugars that can be molded into a myriad of shapes. But the Wheatware company is so secretive about its proprietary equipment that they covered most of it with blue tarps before the Modern Marvels team arrived.
This technology is distinct from plastic injection molding. Plastic injection molding allows for high temperatures to melt plastic pellets into a liquid, thereby pressurizing into a mold, whereas wheat is more like baking bread. In baking bread, if you have too high a heat, what you'll do is you'll burn it, which causes it to solidify. This technology is very specific.
And Wheatware keeps a very close guard on those specifics. Beyond their musical instruments, Wheatware offers golf products, eating utensils, hair combs, clothes hangers, and chopsticks, to name a few.
We got involved with chopsticks when we heard the statistic that 25 million trees are clear-cut each year to produce wood disposable chopsticks. In Japan, they use 65 million chopsticks a day. So we realized that wheatware is heat-resistant, strong, durable, and rigid, the qualities necessary for a chopstick replacement. We got busy.
While similar products can be made from other crops like corn, wheat provides more durability and heat resistance. And this renewable resource will decompose in less than 90 days. That means golf tees can be left on the course as fertilizer. If golfing's not your thing, check out the world's first so-called eco-yo-yo made of wheat. Wheatware may have their wheat on a string, but it turns out there are plenty of other uses for the crop. The inedible parts of the plant, the wheat chaff and straw, make up about half of the yield of the wheat crop. Many farmers use it as animal feed and bedding. It can even be transformed into cat litter, soap, and pillow stuffing. But one of the oldest uses for wheat straw is adobe construction. In fact, the first wheat farmers of the Fertile Crescent also turned to the plant to help build their cities. Bricks made from mud, clay, water, and straw are extremely durable. They can even be found in structures built more than 2,000 years ago.
This is a very archaic method of making a brick. Right now we have sand and clay, and we're going to add a little straw. And as times progressed, people would put the straw on a block and chop it and make small fibers. The smaller the fibers, the stronger the brick.
Though the straw makes up only about 1/6 of each brick, it's the key binding material. Without the tenacity of the wheat straw, the bricks would crumble. Whether you turn to wheat to build your home, quench your thirst, or feed your family, the fate of the crop ultimately depends on the brigade of more than 700 custom harvesters, making the 4-month-long harvest run from Texas to Canada. It's a responsibility that custom cutter Ron Meisner has gladly accepted for 37 years.
It's a very, very tough business. I've seen a lot of people come. I've seen a lot of people go. I will be doing this till the day I die, and it's going to be hard for them to plant me in the cemetery because I'm going down in a 9600 John Deere combine.
And the Meisner crew knows it's them versus weather and time. At stake is a harvest of gold.